Hello and welcome to another episode of Casual Friday. I'm here with the Duck. As always, the show is brought to you by Woo. Links available in the description below. If you have any feedback, feel free to leave it as a comment or DM it to us. It goes straight to the product team. But as always, with any exchange, do not keep any more funds than you need for trading in any one place. The whole point of leverage is to reduce your counterparty risk or to put on massive fuck-off positions that then get liquidated and push the market higher, as we've heard and seen over the last week or so, Don. I do want to start on a slightly different point. I've known you for, 6 years now, give or take. I've known you as many things: a cheat, a thief, a liar, a philanderer. But I did not know that of all those things, which I can tolerate, that you were a monthly time frame disrespecter. I have to draw the moral line somewhere. And for you to just dismiss this monthly resistance that I'm using to cope, and I've been coping since 16K, I don't know whether that's reconcilable with our friendship, also known as our contract to create this show.
I mean, I cannot lie. It's just I'm disrespecting the line. I have to.
You have to.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you respected it in a very micro sense, where you closed a tiny portion of leverage longs and then you reopened them $100 later. Does that count? It's like if people's visas run out and they go to a Greek island for 12 hours and then re-enter. It feels like that type of move. Paying homage, paying dividends, kind of a symbolic nod towards the monthly resistance, and then you're right back into it.
I mean, it kind of was like that, because I was like, this is monthly resistance, and ETH kind of popped a little bit. Dogecoin even popped. And I was like, okay, at this point, I should take some off the table, because that's just not a good sign. And then it went down, like you said, 100, 150. And I was like, fuck this. I cannot have this. But I still, I'm in between now, where we are at monthly resistance. It's quite a strong resistance, but also fuck the monthly resistance. So I don't know. I'm in this weird in between world where I kind of get it, but I also just want to see this thing completely fully go up. So I'm holding, but could be dumb. Who knows?
Yeah, makes sense. It's also a very curious thing where, for example, the stream that you tweeted on Wednesday was very highly populated and was one of the more popular videos. And I very much share your irony in that fact, because essentially, if the prevailing sentiment might be, oh, well, Don's nailed the high time frame moves, so I'm just going to listen to everything Don has to say. Now, that might seem like it makes sense, but it actually doesn't. Because most of the time, my understanding is, from speaking with you on this show and in private from time to time, it's like most of the time you don't give a fuck. Then there's a tiny window where you really, really, really care. And then once the move materializes, there's nothing you can say or do that's helpful or instructive in any sense.
Yep.
So in terms of the net DonAlt content that's actually sort of, actionable and useful, it goes from extreme apathy, which isn't actionable. There's a tiny window of signal. And then past that tiny window of signal, even from a management point of view, or how do I get on a pullback, or what entry do I get? There's nothing to be gained there. So there's a lot of noise for all the signal, but the signal I think is quite strong. And I mean signal in the ordinary English sense, not trade signal, Discord, alpha, whatever thing.
Yeah, I mean, if I have, there's just rare moments where I'm like, okay, I have some sort of clarity on what the market should be doing and what it's gonna do, and then I just capitalize on it. But that doesn't last very long, right? Once the move is actually underway, I'm like, okay, I have no fucking idea where this is gonna go, or if this is gonna pull back or not, or whatever. It's just the high time frame stuff I can figure out a little bit, and that does me well. But like you said, it's a little bit frustrating, doing that stream and then seeing that it was breaking kind of the numbers I've had, we've had on the channel, but especially on the live streams, because I've been doing the live streams, it's been 2 or 3 times more live viewers than normally, if not more than that. And I was like, well, it's kind of dumb, because now I have a bunch of people that I can tell that I have no clue what the fuck is gonna go next. And it's just, but it is what it is. People just want to see someone on a hot streak, and then they're like, I'm gonna copy that person. But that hot streak is going to end eventually, right? So you should have been more attentive before all of that hot streak came around. But it is what it is. Nothing we can do about it now.
Well, you see, I've assumed the unsavory role of the celebrity's wife in this instance. social media and YouTube comments have been something special. I'll put it
Oh
that
yeah.
way. Essentially, a deluge of why don't you just copy trade Don? What do you even do? I mean, that one was hilarious. Someone was like, Cred just doodles and Don tells us what the market's going to do. That one was a banger, but also sting, hashtag ouch, whatever. And it's all basically me getting tagged in DonAlt dick riding tweets, being like, there's like 90% of the paragraph about how great you are in all your calls. And then it's like, thanks, Cred, for asking questions. It's like, fuck me. Okay, this is where we're at now. So you're the celebrity, and I'm supposed to start. Yeah, I'm like the first lady, mate. I have to start some charitable foundation and wash trade some Lockheed Martin money or whatever it is that political and celebrity spouses do. So fair enough. I did bring it upon myself by sort of skewing these shows towards asking questions. But I think part of it is also like these are pretty tricky to host, Like maybe we should do a trial episode where you take over the hosting role and like setting the scene and the questions and like going through the charts and doing the setup, because it's not super easy. But also,
no.
I'm not complaining. Look, at the end of the day, as long as people enjoy the show, that's what it's there for. But logging onto Twitter to get called your bitch is slightly less fun. It's the least fun part of it all. I'll say that much.
Yeah, I mean, people are just kind of weird. I think in general, like people are way too obsessed what other people do with their time, right? Like, or like even how they trade, what they do, like all that kind of stuff. It's just like it shouldn't really matter too much, but apparently it does. And yeah, I've seen some shit where, I mean, I appreciate when people say nice things about me, but you don't have to kind of like be an idiot, right? Like just say something nice. It's not like you have to be like nice to one person and then you have to kind of dunk on the other one. It's just kind of dumb, in my opinion. And I'm like entirely too dumb to do the host show, like the host part. Like I'm way too dumb for that. I think that's my personal nightmare. I'd forget the questions. I'd forget the structure. I'd forget everything.
We should try it at some point. That'd be quite a funny episode.
Yeah,
I think.
I'm down.
So now that going on to the main event, Don, I need you to tell me what the market's going to do, when it's going to do it, and how it's going to do it, because that's the only reason people click on this thing. So starting from the monthly, we're going to have a monthly close quite soon. Actually, 4 days left until this pretty impressive monthly candle closes. 35K is the important monthly resistance. I've seen some commentary highlighting the so-called cluster order block thing between 38 and 45. And that's in some form the midpoint of the macro range between 60 and 30, essentially. And I sort of get why that's there, but I don't personally put too much weight into it. I mean, maybe for like short to medium term trading, there's something there. And for example, if we get like a bearish monthly close and then the next month spikes into that, but we still close below this monthly, something like that, it would be useful. But the reason I don't put that much weight into it is because if we get like a clean monthly reclaim type of thing, I think the magnitude of that signal just takes precedence over kind of a midpointy give and take resistance at 40K. So in terms of like what's more important, I think the 35K, whatever range low reclaim is just too strong a signal for the market to then turn around kind of in the middle of nowhere at the midpoint of the range or even below it. And the only case, as mentioned, that I can see it making sense is that if the monthly close is actually garbage and gets stuffed like properly, which doesn't seem super likely at the moment, but if it gets stuffed and then next month we spike into that far less impressive level, then I could make sense of it. But I think it's more of a distraction than not. Do you have anything above 35 where you're like, wow, I should really look out here?
No, I mean, I think, like you said, we have an old range here, right? From between 21 and kind of like 22, basically top range. And yeah, if we reclaim the bottom of it, I don't care what we do inside of that range. I'm thinking you reclaim a range, you go to the top of the range. Like that's the kind of simple way of looking at it. It happens very often, especially when you have these kind of high time frame ranges. Everything in between you can draw. I think like a level at 45K is not the worst. I think if we reclaim 35, have a nice close, spike into 45, maybe we get a retrace from there. But I'm not expecting any kind of trend shifting from like random levels inside of that range. It just seems odd. So if you want to buy pullbacks, maybe those levels will help you. But for me, it's not that important. I think in general, like if we get rejected here at 35, it will look like a bearish retest. And I mean, okay, that makes sense. But if that doesn't come come to be. I mean, like the monthly time frame bears, if this breaks out above 35, I think they're gonna basically, them getting out of position is gonna push this higher than 40k. Like that. So for me, I don't have levels at 40 or 45. I could see 45 be important, but that's the earliest for me. Like 35, which we've been struggling with. That's kind of where we're getting rejected from in the last few days, and that's it. Don't think anything else matters too much.
Yeah, I think if you take the monthly range in its entirety, you essentially get 58k, the highest monthly close on the first 21 rally as the range high. Obviously 35 is the range low, and there's a decent midpoint. Like you know, I think late 30s and early 40s is maybe not so great, but I'm inclined to agree that sort of 44 to 46, which is that monthly mid range and the actual monthly cluster. We used to talk about that a fair bit, if you recall. There's at least something there that, you know, even if it's not trend reversing and a less potent signal than a range reclaim, if you're looking for, you know, moderate short to medium term take profit stuff, or just hoping for a dip from there to get punts in to basically take advantage of the reclaim signal, I think that's decent. And it's not too much to sort of crowd the chart with, right? You essentially have 35, 44 to 46, and then the range high. That's not particularly busy, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
With the monthly close, 4 days away, how would the close shift your view, if at all? So, for example, let's say this is like a snapshot in time, and this is how the monthly closes. So, like a wick closes below, but no rejection. Would that be enough to change your view / positioning? What if we push down in the next 4 days and it looks, you know, a bit more wicky and a bit more rejecty? Or just obviously a clean close straight through 35k at 37, 38, basically another leg. How much weight is there on the monthly close, and, you know, what do some of those outcomes look like?
I mean, if we close below 30k, I think that would be quite bearish. Basically, if we close anywhere below the previous highest monthly close, that'd be terrible. At that point, I'd most definitely sell. Otherwise, I'm not going to change anything. And I mean, if we close exactly at 35k, I could see myself try to sell 45k quite aggressively. So that would cap my upside kind of expectations a little bit, because it's too good of a setup to kind of throw away. Like at that point, like you go to 45, you get a little bit of hype going, and then you just completely dump it down again. Like with a close at resistance, that would make sense. Like it's a bearish retest, so you have a bunch of people shorting the next month, they get blown up. It pushes to 45, but it is actually a bearish retest. That kind of setup I like. So I'd be taking profit into like a spike next month if we got to close at 35. I think, depending on how we're trading there, but would be quite likely. And then, yeah, like I said, below 30k would be quite terrible.
So
And
arguably
anything,
35 on monthly isn't as important as 30k sort of weekly and the breakout in general.
Yeah, the reason why 30k is just because you basically, like, you have a wick towards monthly resistance and you get massively rejected and just kind of like spike all the way back down again. At that point, I think the momentum would just be too bad.
Right.
And in general, like losing 30k or like getting even close to 30k.
You've given back too much, right? Essentially.
You've given back way too much. Like you don't want to, like the thing is, this is set up perfectly to run, like properly run away from everyone that's sitting on the sidelines. Because right now, trust me on this, there's a shitload of people that just want this to pull back so they can buy. Now, they're either going to be wrong and this is just going to run and they're going to have to chase, or they're going to be wrong and this is just going to completely dump and they're going to get filled and then fucked over. I don't think if you're waiting for a pullback, like a proper pullback towards like 30, 31k, that there's a chance that you're going to get filled and you're going to be right. So basically, like all these people are either not going to get filled or they're going to be wrong, which both kind of sucks. So I think if you're like planning to buy a retrace here, you have to be quite aggressive, as in like you take an early one, or you just don't do it at all. Because if you get a deep retrace, I think this is kind of fucked. Because just based on how this set up, there was no way to get in. If you give everyone a way in, that just seems too charitable and too you just lose momentum too much at that point. It looks like the China Xi candle that we had back in whatever it was ages ago, back in 2019, like a massive spike upwards and then just distributive. Now, I think we are not really in the same kind of, like, we're not really trading the same way. Back then we were spiking into resistance and actually got rejected by resistance on the daily time frame. In this instance, we made new highs, which is quite different than what we did back then. But I just wanted to mention it, like, if you get an aggressive pullback, unless it completely wicks and then closes the day nicely again, it's more than likely to just keep going, I think. And otherwise, I'm just expecting this to go sideways for a little bit and then go up. So either aggressive up or aggressive down. It's very unlikely to give you like a nice pullback and then you get in and then it starts going up again. I think that's quite unlikely.
So high time frame pullbacks are illegal, Don, in this new paradigm. Yes. Because if they happen, then the whole setup's fucked.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the weekly, right? Because we've looked at the monthly, but if you look at the weekly time frame, if you draw on like the range that we talked about, like the all-time high range, like if this weekly goes to shit this weekend, right? Like if we close sub 32K, that starts looking really shitty. And then you have like that's why, like, we're back in the old range. That's great. But if this kind of shows too much weakness and just kind of dumps into the weekend, which is quite unlikely, in my opinion, weekends usually just trade flat or do whatever the market is like doing prior, as in, like, if the market is trending down and you have a weekend, good chance it keeps on doing like a little bit of a shitty price action to the downside. But we've had up moves, right? So you'd expect this to either go sideways or up, but could obviously just also go down. But then sub 32K on the weekly also doesn't look that great. So we have a few invalidations. It's quite nice. They're not too far away from price. If we close above 32K this week, I think if you get a pullback into 32K next week, that's the most aggressive, like that's the only pullback that you can really buy.
The only acceptable pullback, right?
Yeah, because otherwise, like, if you go lower than that, that starts looking really shitty, especially given the monthly close that we're gonna get.
Yes.
And also just in general, like, you're giving people too much of an entrance, like an entry, and I don't think that's how this should be playing out. So.
And it brings in the whole argument of, if it's so strong, why is it pulling back immediately, 1 week after the impulse candle, so on and so forth. Yes. It's always like a delicate balancing act if you're trying to time pullbacks on momentum-oriented markets. And the balancing act is essentially, you want it to pull back enough to give you an entry with invalidation, so you don't feel like you're chasing, but you don't want it to pull back too much to where the original momentum-driven idea becomes threatened / lower probability, right?
Yep.
And that's always and that's why I guess you avoid it entirely, because fuck making that trade-off. But I think those are the two forces at play, right? Like, I want to pull back because, like, it just makes my life easier trading, but I don't want it to go too deep, because then the whole reason I'm buying in the first place is in trouble, essentially.
Yep.
I agree. This weekly close would be pretty big. 32.2, whatever that level is, the weekly range low. That'd just be a nice weekly close. And then I think if you get a pullback there, that's great. I think, to be honest, even if you get consolidation for like a week or two above that weekly range low, I think that's pretty good as well, to be honest. Because as we've discussed before, a lot of the times in these really strong, impulsive, trend shifting markets, a consolidation can be a form of a pullback, right? Yes. So that might be something to look out for, but obviously we'll have newsletter, casual Friday episodes, Wednesday streams, all that stuff to go with it. But yeah, weekly, monthly close, I think it'd be nice if they lined up. Maybe that's asking for too much, but to get it above the monthly and above the weekly, I think that might be one of those really clean closes that then just starts nuking on the monthly open. But I think that'd be a really good setup, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you get a good monthly close, you get a good weekly close, and then it just starts getting stuffed towards like 32 and not that close to 30. I think that is pretty palatable. You wanted a pullback, you got one. But I feel like your assessment is correct in terms of how people treat these pullbacks. they either ignore them. Well, no, this is how, like, in my estimation, this is at least the decision tree, what it looks like. So you want a pullback in the market that's broken out, and then either you're just targeting too low, where by the time, if it goes there, you're like fundamentally very wrong, or there's like a time frame mismatch where you're looking for 5-minute, 15-minute pullbacks, and you get something like a bit more moderate in between. It's just really fucking tricky, I guess, is what I'm trying to say at the end of it. But yeah, I guess final note on the monthly is that if we close below the monthly resistance at 35, then contextually, if we then rally next month into 44 to 46, because of the close, that would become a more attractive sell, or at least a de-risk. And then on the weekly time frame, as long as we close above 32.2, that's a good weekly signal. That's also the only acceptable pullback level / area. Anything that starts giving back too much of the breakout candle and getting close to 30 is probably bad news. Is that fair?
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, man. You just look at this weekly time frame. You're like, shit. There's a lot of space here. You know. I hope it doesn't get stuffed. That would be one of the ugliest tops, I think, or bearish patterns that we can get. That would be really hideous.
Redemption arc.
I would give him the keys to the city at that point.
But the thing is, he actually capitulated, my friend, which makes this
he like kind of capitulated, right? Because he also made the point of being like, well, if it breaks below, I mean, you're in agreement with him, Don. You know, if it breaks below 30, the bear case isn't entirely invalidated. So we should bring him on the show. You can have a meeting of the minds, given you have so much in common.
Yeah.
We've
both been shorting since 16K.
For sure. Yeah, that's the weekly time frame. Anything else to add? I don't think there's a whole lot, because realistically, the closes are very close to each other. The levels are really close to each other. Even the 44, 46 midpoint, because it's the same yearly range, are roughly in the same area. So whatever views you might have had on the monthly are sort of nicely complemented by and actionable on the weekly time frame, which is nice.
I mean, one thing is pretty certain that we're not going to close. I mean, I'd be surprised if we closed the monthly above 35. Like that, I mean, it'd be very, very nice, but I'd be surprised. We don't have that much time left, and it's all on the weekend. But I mean, could obviously happen, but I'd be surprised. But it'd be nice if we at least close the weekly above resistance, because if we close the weekly below resistance and the monthly into resistance, at that point, it starts, even for me, starts being like I'm counter trading basically the 2 time frames that I care most about. Like, that's a little bit tough. So I would like to at least have one of them. If we get both of them, let's fucking go. But at least one of them would be nice. So that's what I'm watching personally.
You can handle the monthly close being into resistance, but the weekly close below resistance is unacceptable.
Yes, especially given we've traded so far above it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we traded quite a bit. Like, if we just traded into it and didn't have a top wick, at that point I'd be like, okay. But if we traded too far into this range that if we lost the range, I'd be like, okay, this is actually like a loss of range, not just, okay, randomly the weekly closed. And no, there was actually quite aggressive selling into the all-time high range. Like, there's a big difference there. It depends on how you get there, how you trade around it, right? Like, because if we just traded into 32 and then didn't do anything, I can be bullish into resistance at that point. But if we traded above it and then lose all of it, not great. So that's what I'm watching.
Yeah, no, very sensible. The daily time frame is notably absent of solid levels. The weekly and the monthly ranges are quite, they cover a lot of ground. And then if you look on the daily, you really have to start zooming out and losing candlesticks if you want daily levels, which is never a fantastic sign if you want those daily levels to be good. I don't think it's as big a deal because, again, the monthly and the weekly have it covered. But that does beg the question, essentially what is important on the daily time frame. Interestingly enough, the weekly level that we've discussed, that range low at 32.2, whatever it is, on the daily time frame, it comes in just above the baby pips support resistance level, that cluster of highs where you want your classic sort of support resistance flip. So maybe if there's a moderate pull back to that weekly level, it's sort of uncomfortable on the daily time frame because it wouldn't necessarily get quite as deep as the daily time frame traders would want, but it would still be into weekly support. That's really the only thing I can think of on the daily time frame that makes sense. Obviously, there's the with the benefit of foresight. If this daily consolidates for longer, let's say a week or two, then maybe that develops either into a range or a consolidation, and that becomes tradable on its own terms without pulling back to 32.2, without reaching the weekly. And even within the daily consolidation, if you were to break it down on the 4-hour or the hourly, if you're looking for levels, you can find them, right? Like, just lower the time frame and you'll find something. But stuff like previous week's low, previous day's low, weekly open, daily open, those types of contextual levels can become quite useful if you're in a post-breakout area and the market isn't super willing to give you dips all the way back to the point of breakout. But all of that in a very roundabout way to ask, what do you think of the daily time frame? Is it just to defer to the monthly and the weekly, wait and see? Do you want to see more structure on the daily? Do you have some hidden level that wasn't made obvious in your live stream? What do we do at this time frame?
No, I don't think there's any levels on the daily necessarily. Like, if you want to get giga bearish, right? I think below 30K on the daily just makes sense. That looks horrendous at that point. Like, if you give back all of that massive daily candle that we had on the 23rd of October, like, if you give all of that back, I think at that point we're kind of like in deep trouble. So that's like one level where the bulls, in my opinion, get invalidated. Aligns with Capo, which is great, which Capo's levels. But yeah, when I just look at the daily time frame, what I see is something that really didn't give any pullbacks for anyone to get in, right? Like, we had 2 weeks of constant upside. Now we've had 2 days of pullback, and I can already feel like the bearishness creeping back into people, because there's still a lot of doubt. There's still a lot of kind of like bear market PTSD. And they're like, oh, it's pulling back, and they're like going on the 1 hour or the 4 hour, and they see like a bunch of red candles. But what they kind of forget is that this market just basically teleported upwards, literally 35%, and that you're gonna get a pullback, right, eventually. And this, so far, the two last, like, if you pretend like this daily has already closed, we've had a pullback of 1% today and yesterday. And I can already feel the bears getting excited, which I think is really healthy. If you want some upside, like, this gets me excited. Obviously, if this continues and it keeps on bleeding out, that wouldn't be great. But I mean, expecting pullbacks after 35% move, or like 1 or 2 red candles on the daily time frame that only has 2 in the last 2 weeks, I mean, that just makes sense, right? So
I mean, to be fair, it's what the ETH BTC bulls have been doing, right? It's just the opposite.
yeah,
where you have 1 or 2 counter trend candles in the ETH BTC cases, green, and you're like, oh, well, that's it. It's time to rotate. I guess the same applies to BTC USD in this instance, where 2 red dailies, you're like, oh, I fucking knew it. I fucking knew it was a scam.
It's really interesting because they're basically doing the same thing. So basically, like, Bitcoin broke out, and they're like, okay, now it has to turn around. And then the ETH bulls, they're like, ETH broke down, it has to turn around because it's a fake out, right? And the base, like, both the Bitcoin bears and the ETH bulls make the same argument. Basically, yeah, this is a fake breakout. But if there's one thing that doesn't really pay, in my opinion, is like anticipating that like a breakout is false from the get-go, unless you have really, really strong evidence, right? Like, if you're sitting there and you're fading every single breakout, I don't think you're going to make much money. It's just not really a strategy that makes a lot of sense, to me anyway. If anything, you have a really clean, like, level that you can trade, given that the market broke out. And then you can go and kind of be like, okay, as long as you're above there, I don't do anything if you're bearish, right? Like, for example, with Bitcoin, as long as you're above 32/30, as a bear, you just wouldn't want to do anything, right? And then you can, like, if you miss out on the first 1K or 2K off the move, it doesn't really matter if you, like, if we lose 30K, I think there's a good chance that it just completely collapses. And then it really doesn't matter that you missed out on the previous, like, couple percent. But you can, like, you'd be much better off just kind of assuming that breakouts are real until they're proven not to be, especially in this market. If you faded every breakout on the altcoins, for example, I mean, that's what people do too. Like, if you see all of these high funding, high whatever coins on Binance, people just tend to, like, try to short something that is up a lot instead of, just trading with the trend for as long as it kind of makes sense. So that's kind of how I look at it. I don't want to I don't want to bet on fake outs at all, unless I have a really, really strong case, which right now I just don't see.
Yeah, it's kind of like a make the fewest assumptions possible and take the market for what it is for as long as possible until there's really strong evidence to the contrary. You know, it's like when a girl doesn't text me back, I just assume she's busy and she doesn't hate me, although that assumption isn't quite as ironclad as the breakdown one. Although it does cause me to have a breakdown, so I guess there's some synergy there. Nonetheless, let me go back to the chart. Oh, Don, it's dipping as we speak. It's over.
Oh no!
Do you want to change your views before we upload this? 16K or 12K is the only real question.
Delete the video and we'll read it.
Let's restart it. I haven't got the mental energy to do another one of these. Trust me, mate. Like,
no,
you know how it goes.
My food is here in like half an hour.
Oh God! Well, we won't make this a 2-hour episode then. Fine. That's most of BTC. I mean, for me, the weekly 32 level is a very important pivot point. And then on the intraday timeframes, I'd be willing to do business at around the sort of 1 hour cluster. I don't know if you have this at like 33K. I think those are the only levels that contextually make sense and aren't too ridiculous. I think anything else sort of above 33K or something of that nature is just too shallow in the middle of nowhere. At least that you've got hourly time frame cope. If you want to be really aggressive and put on like almost like a systematic position, you know, like above 32 weekly equals bullish, and I just want entry. I don't give a shit. I think 33K is an hourly works for that. And then if the market gives a deeper pullback, the maximum permissible depth, if you will, is 32K-ish on the weekly. Provided it could wick below, but it really shouldn't, right? Like if the whole high time frame range reclaim, this is the last retest you'll ever see in your life, whatever momentum idea is correct. If there is a weekly gift towards 32K, shouldn't really be spending too much time there. And certainly on a weekly closing basis, that should hold. So that's what my rough roadmap looks like, at least. 33K intraday if you're really aggressive, 32K weekly close, just to make sure we haven't been turbo scammed. Although I do respect the monthly resistance slightly more than you do, but I guess one of us has to, because, you know, we can't just suck off the time frame for 6 months and then ignore it when the market reaches it. So I'll carry that bucket.
But then again, like, I've actually been quite consistent, because do you remember like 3 or 4 months ago when I was like, I actually like that we didn't hit the monthly level. Like it's more like if you retested, it wouldn't be as good. Like
something of that nature. Yes, you'll forgive me for not knowing all your quotes off the top of my head from the last 4 months, but
but basically, like, I've been looking at this thing and I've been like, when I was bearish, I was like, I actually don't want this to go to 35. Like, for me, the fact that we retested it is already a sign of weakness from the bears. Like, it should have stopped before, especially given how, like, all of the shit that has happened in the last 2 years, basically, and the bears still couldn't prevent this from bearishly retesting and getting awfully close to bull market territory. Like, at that point, the bears just kind of suck. But then again, maybe I'm mocking the monthly time frame.
The monthly gods, Don.
Yes, I mean, I'm
terrified. All the fake deities to anger, are you sure you want to pick that one?
Oh, I mean, the monthly time frame is actually like the only one that I really like rarely fade. In this case, I wouldn't even, like, for me, I'm not even fading it yet. If we close at 35, like I said, and then kind of spike higher next month, then that would be me kind of playing along with the monthly time frame rather than fading it. So like I just don't think this should be it, but I could be wrong.
No, it makes sense. Makes sense. So we'll keep tabs on this. I guess just to get it out of the way, the most bullish argument one can make is essentially some version of 33K is 6K BTC, right? Where you have this mega high time frame, scary looking retest level that it took the market ages to come back and retest, and oh, it's so scary, and is it a bear market retest, whatever, and then it just plows through and keeps going, right? Yeah. So 6K, when it broke down, it was like, oh my God, that was support for a year, and now it's going to be resistance for 10 years, you know? And instead, the market just blasted through it. And if you look at the momentum continuation from that point on the weekly, it basically went up like 150, 170%, and there was basically one red week of pullback to speak of the whole time. I know you had a similar chart on the weekly with the 12K breakout, right? From your stream, where that weekly broke out from 12K. And then you essentially had 0 entries until 20K. And even at 20K, you've got like barely visible red candles before a similar leg up. Again, another double before you got a so-called pullback of 2 red weeks. So,
which will laughably be small in comparison to whatever happened before.
Yes, and they seem like, obvious entries in hindsight, but you remember the sentiment at that point when you get like a red week after so much green. It's like, okay, well, it's time to retest 20K.
Yeah.
So that's always how it goes. The second you get a pullback, if you're on the wrong side of the market or have been on the wrong side of the market, you always want a larger pullback all the way down to where it came from. And the market is rarely that charitable.
I mean, just imagine you sit there on the sidelines for a week while the market just goes completely vertical, and then you have a red
I don't have
day,
to imagine Don. Sorry, go on.
And then you have like one red day, and you're like, fuck yeah, finally I'm going to get my pullback. And you still have the levels in mind that you had in mind before, right? And then the thing just pulls back to where it was the day before, not the week before. And you're just still sitting there, and you just don't want to buy that. Like, it's very, very hard as like someone that was sitting on the sidelines to get that. And that's what you want to avoid. In general, like when you're offside on these large moves, there's almost no chance that you're going to trade anything of the move correctly. Like that's why no, but that's why I'm sometimes so overly aggressive in my trading, right? Because like sometimes I'm like, oh, this is resistance, but I'm gonna buy. And the reason is exactly that, because I know like if this is the move, and this might sound like completely horrendous trading advice, but for me it just works. Like if this is the move and I don't have a position, I'm gonna see this thing move and I will not get a position until the bull market is over, right? Like that's just, and for me, like I'm not going to be happy missing a bull market, but I can live with it, right? But I don't want to be like in that position. I fucking hate it. People are fucking annoying. Like when you miss a move, people on Twitter, it's actually the worst part about it, right? Like if you have a Twitter profile, so tiresome.
How many hours do you have for me to share my experience with this, Don? I agree.
It's so dumb, right? Because like you're already upset that you missed the move. Like obviously you would have liked to make money, and then people on Twitter just go completely and utterly fully retarded, and they're like pretending like your life is over now that you missed the move. I mean,
and then your co-host nailed the move, so they call you a double retard because you had it in front of you on a silver platter. It's even better. I mean, there's also a difference between like missing a move versus like shorting and getting blown the fuck out. Like a pretty big difference, but it seems like in crypto Twitter land that there's no distinction between those things. Like if you missed it, that means you were short from the pico bottom and you've lost all your money, as opposed to, well, my P&L line is, flat. Also, there's a very interesting dynamic that's quite hard to reconcile, where essentially if you were listening to a lot of commentary, in the preceding weeks and months, the whole argument was just wait for easy mode and then everything will literally print for months and you can't go wrong and it's like the best thing ever. And the time frame that's referenced when talking about easy mode is weeks at least, but usually months, right? 3, 4, 6, 8 months. And then God forbid you miss one move, 1 week or 2 weeks of price action. It's like, oh, well, it's over for you. That's it. You're done. You know, you weren't there for it. It's like, wait, which one is it? Is it easy mode equals months of, you know, being able to do everything, get away with everything? Or is it, if you're not in the market for 2 weeks, your life is over? Because those two are, you know, slightly different.
Yeah, the funniest thing about all of it is that the people that short and then like people that are like publicly quite bearish, and then the market moves and they're like, oh, I took a loss, but it wasn't that bad. I just lost a tiny % of my portfolio. They're the ones that are congratulated, like, oh, you're so great for being like honest and blah blah blah, right? Whereas the people that are sitting on the sideline just get completely and utterly nuked.
Oh yeah, dude. It's better to it's better not to make money. Sorry, it's better to lose money than to not make it.
Oh yeah,
because then you can go down the whole self-pity / but also in a way narcissistically self-congratulatory. Like, you know what? It is time to announce that I am human, and I took also, it's never a big loss, right? Like if someone's going to be fake humble bragging about not, you know, being on the wrong side of the market, it's always, yes, I must admit, on the advice of counsel, that I took a tiny scratch in BTC perpetuals. I just want to be transparent and be a shining beacon in the industry of honesty and true, you know, transparent trading. And everyone's like, oh my God, you're the best. When do we short? It's like, fuck me, is that how it works? And then if I just meme and talk shit and have my weekly level at 30K, then yeah, my mentions look a bit different. But whatever, this isn't about my Twitter experience. We try to keep this shit helpful. But it is a funny dynamic. Like, there are so many tricks that you can do to farm social clout while being fake humble, right? Like, you can say that you got stopped out and that it was a tiny position, even if your account got blown the fuck out. You can say that you missed moves even though you planned for it and it's like a part of trading. And you can say something trite about risk management, like, oh, it's okay, I'll like get over this because my risk is always managed. There's so much shit you can say when you're on the wrong side of the market. Most of the time, you know that these people are getting blown the fuck out because, God forbid, the market went the other way. You'd see like mega P&L screenshots and like, oh, this is my biggest trade of the quarter or whatever else. But unsurprisingly, when it goes wrong, it's like, okay, time to pull out the fake humility card, take a tiny scratch, just being real with you. And everyone's like, oh my God, you're the best. Yeah, it's super frustrating, but also quite funny at this point to observe those dynamics.
And it's the same tricks. It's the same tricks from years ago. And people like, because basically like crypto Twitter is basically recycling, like not necessarily recycling, but there's new people coming in and a few old people stay, but not enough to kind of just call out the bullshit, right? Like if it was 90% old people and 10% new people, like everyone would just be like, hey, just shut the fuck up. We've seen this before. But it's like 50% new people, 50% old people at best, right? Because a lot of people just lose a shitload in crypto and then just disappear. And then you see these people just be like they're doom posting, right? Like everything is going to zero. It's completely fucked. And then the market goes up 30% from where they set this, right? They don't mention anything during like 15-20% move up, right? Of about like changing their views or whatever. And then, like you said, it's a tiny position. It was just a hedge. It was just blah blah blah. And then people actually go in and are like, oh yeah, this. I mean, even legends lose sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, that's my favorite. It's shocking. My favorite also is the surprise P&L card. You know, where like motherfuckers will straight up disappear off the timeline, and you're like, okay, well, what the fuck? You clearly had quite and there are a lot of smaller accounts trying to sort of build up their audience base doing this, but it just happens on Twitter in general. But those are just the ones I've noticed, and it's like they disappear, and then the market just blasts through whatever levels they had or, you know, ideas that they were posting, and then as soon as it pulls back like 0.5%. Boom, there's the P&L card with the miraculous top tick short being like, oh, they were, you know, like business as usual or whatever. It's like, seriously? First of all, that came out of nowhere and after the move had already transpired. And when I say the move already transpired, I mean the 0.5% pullback as opposed to the, you know, 30% move that went again. It's so trite and tiresome. Yeah. But yeah, I guess just stuff to, you know, if there's even one new person listening who's not familiar with some of the tools of the trade, if you will, of social media, then maybe this section has been helpful. Or we're just completely self-indulging our gossiping housewife instincts, Don. It could be that.
Very well could be that.
Could be. Classic technical roundup episode. I've been live for however long. Well, not live, recording, and we've only spoken about BTC. This is what you get. But yeah, all of that to say, the initial point was the max bull argument is essentially that 30k is 6k, right? Or 30k is the 12k breakout. That if the big resistance fails, you get a trending move that goes much higher than you think and doesn't give you a pullback anywhere near the type that you'd expect. So yeah, that's really all there is to say, I think, on BTC. Probably too much, if anything. We'll revisit now ETH BTC, your favorite chart, Don.
Yeah.
The weekly close on this looks like it's going to be quite rough. I think, at least my view was that 057 is the real range low, and that the deepest swing of 054 is like the cope range low.
Yeah.
That's at least my view. And at this point, whichever one you choose, it's not super helpful, right? 057's clearly broken. 054 is kind of like hanging on for dear life, but I don't think it's a particularly strong level of support. And again, if you zoom out, it just looks like this thing is accelerating, especially coming from a period of pretty low volatility where it went sideways basically June through August. This seems like the breakdown portion from that. And I agree with your Wednesday analysis. If this were any other chart, or if it were an inverted crypto chart, you would essentially say this is a long base that's just now breaking, and look out below or look out above and basically step the fuck out the way, right? But because we have, rose-tinted ETH glasses that we spoke about last week, we're inclined to believe that every red candle is a sin and something's broken and not right and oversold, mispriced, what have you. So it should revert any day now. You did tweet some worrying commentary about, ETH BTC. If this thing turns green and keeps doing, this essentially, I would be worried. Has that materialized enough to influence your opinion yet, or was that basically retraced by the time you were done sending the tweet?
It was basically retraced by the time I sent it. But
Wonderful.
It is like, and this is something that you can just check on the chart. Like that daily basically initiated the Bitcoin down move, right? So that's something to look out for. You will. I doubt, very, very much doubt that we're gonna get any ETH strength without Bitcoin just disappearing lower. So like Bitcoin, ETH needs to stay low for this run to continue, and I think it will. Just look at ETH. I mean, just look at the damn chart, right? Like it's actually crazy how many people disagree. And they're like, oh, ETH is gonna catch up. And like you said, with the cope range low and the real range low, I've seen people redraw their charts. I've seen people be like,
shout out Trader Main.
Yeah, I mean, it's just.
How does Trader Main have to redraw stuff? His box is the entire chart. If he's redrawing something, you're in trouble because he's already had half the damn thing in gray.
Yeah, I mean, like that's the thing. This is just a bearish chart. And it's the same argument that I made for Bitcoin, right? Like Bitcoin broke out. Let it be a breakout. Give it a chance, right? And it's the same with ETH. Like this is a breakdown. Why would you want to be fading it? Like the thing is, like if you're aggressively bullish, and I think this is quite aggressively bullish, then just be bullish when we reclaim 0.057, right? That's only 7-8%. It's actually almost 9% at this point because the market, like ETH BTC, just keeps going down. But it's like it's below 10% away. Like you can stomach it at 10%, like missing out on 10% for this to kind of come back where it was 2 weeks ago. And then you can long the range reclaim into whatever, like your flippening that you believe in, right? But for me, this is just a breakout. Like if I was aggressively kind of looking for positions, I'd be looking for shorts, right? I don't short crypto anymore, so I'm not doing any of that. But like if I had to pick a side of the market right now, like right this second, I mean, I would fucking hate it because it's a breakout trade, but I'd short this thing. Because it's just a high time frame breakdown, a huge base, and if you short it and you're wrong, I mean, you can flip bullish, and this is actually one of the ones where you can actually flip because you have a decent invalidation, right? So for me, it doesn't really make sense to fade this thing. It's the same as Bitcoin. It doesn't really make sense to fade this thing. Just let it go. and see where it goes. And then if it does put in any like massive green candles, the funny thing is everyone will be buying it on ETH/USD, and I think then the Bitcoin run is probably over. And you're probably not going to have much fun on ETH/USD, but at least on a relative base, you're gonna make some money back. So that's that.
Yeah,
But,
so in terms of trade management with this thing, 057 being the range low, let's say we, in the next week, 2, 3, whatever, from this area, give or take, it starts to rally and blasts through 057. Would that make you bearish BTC? Or would that be a strong enough signal to make you trade manage BTC? Or is it just like a, hey, early red flag type of thing? Like, how important is it for this thing to stay weak?
Quite important. It's
Right.
basically like I would probably sell my position, because we're still like just ignoring everything else, right? Like the global situation still hasn't really improved. We're still in a time where it's kind of uncertain where the world is going for a little bit, at least. Like we've had weakness, we had war, we had a bunch of shit, right? So if not everything goes to like according to plan, basically, it's very hard for me to stay bullish. And that is one of the ones where I'm like, it makes zero sense for ETH to go up in my eyes. The only way for ETH to go up is froth. And I very much don't want to hold crypto into froth. I will mercilessly sell everything I have if I see any signs of froth. Just because, like I said, we have quite a bit of weakness everywhere, and I'm not going to hold into that. So far, there's nothing of the sort, though, right? Like we've had a bunch of meme coins go up, we've had a bunch of like a little bit of movements here and there, but it's very, very contained, and it's just basically a bunch of idiots. And I don't think like I say this in an endearing way, right? Because I mean, if you're dumb enough, you make money in crypto. If you're smart enough, you make money in crypto. If you're like someone that buys ETH while you get a Bitcoin ETF, I think you don't make money in crypto. So that's kind of like my view on this thing. And if it starts outperforming, I think that's going to take away bid from Bitcoin, and that's going to make people rotate back into Bitcoin. And I don't think there's enough for that.
And then it's like a very memey setup, right? Like local froth signal into monthly resistance.
Yes, and at that point, I'm very happy to sell, right?
Yeah.
And I like it's not like I'm like insisting on my position, right? Like if I see any bad signs, I'm gonna dump this shit, and I'm gonna be quite happy because I made a bunch of money on this. I actually didn't expect this to perform this well, so if I get a good reason to sell, I'm be happy to take that profit, because it's been a windfall, if anything. Like I didn't expect Bitcoin to kind of like reclaim and go above 32K this early. I'm glad I caught it, but I'm also not averse to like just closing positions when the evidence doesn't support my positioning anymore. So yeah.
As far
Back to
as
you,
other
Casey.
froth signals, I mean, ETH being the obvious one, what would some of these altcoins have to do for you to be like, okay, well, this is a bit silly? Or do you think any altcoin froth would be reflected in ETH anyway, so it's a self-solving problem?
Yeah, I think in general, like you'll see it in ETH.
Okay.
And the cool thing is that like the smaller coins and like the smaller narratives, like it's all like it's pretty hard to see altcoin like froth in general in the market, or how far it can go. Basically, like you see like when the market turns up and you get like Pepe going 200% up or whatever, you're like, oh, the market is so frothy. But I mean, that's a tiny percentage of people in crypto that actually even trade this thing, right? But the cool thing now is that ETH is basically like almost as big in the media, at least, as Bitcoin is, right? So if you're gonna get any froth, or if ETH goes up, basically, that's much better indication of like people just doing dumb shit than the altcoins are, because if just one or two people with a little bit of money rotate into some shitcoin, that's gonna go up, right? And if you want to corner a shitcoin market, you can. If you want to corner ETH, that's just not going to happen. If you want to corner Bitcoin, it's not going to happen unless you're like a big player, right? And we don't have that many of those anymore. So for me, like this is actually quite a nice kind of setup. basically you just have to watch ETH, and if ETH goes up, that's kind of a sign that people are rotating poorly, and then maybe that runs for a little bit, but I think it's gonna be quite close to the top of whatever this is. And it doesn't mean like, okay, you get a 5% daily candle or whatever, it's all over. Obviously depends, right? Like if you get a 20% down week on ETH BTC and then you get a 5% daily bounce, that doesn't have to mean too much. But if you start reclaiming important support or resistance levels, that has meaning. And for me, that would be enough to kind of reevaluate, take some profit, maybe not all of it, but take some at least.
Yeah, so essentially we're at in an area of monthly resistance for BTC. Froth is bad. The thing that sort of encapsulates Froth the most would be ETH outperformance relative to BTC. Altcoins can serve as that signal, but given sort of liquidity, market cap, easier to corner, unless like funding rates across the board become super skewed or something of that nature.
Yes, pretty much.
ETH is going to be the main determinant of Froth. Okay, yeah,
for me anyway. Or like,
consistent.
I mean, and you can call it froth, or you can just call it stupidity, because I think like literally the ETH trade does not make any sense to me. And that's my opinion, right? Like obviously, I see a lot of very smart traders that think otherwise, but to me, it like makes zero sense. I just don't understand it. Like you get a Bitcoin ETF, like Bitcoin and ETH basically are in the same bucket, right? Like you have Bitcoin and ETH, and then you have the shit coins, right? So like if you have someone that wants to buy something serious, they're gonna buy Bitcoin or ETH. Now Bitcoin has a clear driving force behind what it's like. The narrative is basically pretty clear. ETH not so much right now. Like you'd have to bet like 4D chess it and be like, yeah, Bitcoin's gonna get an ETF. We're probably gonna get an ETF for ETH at some point down the line too. It's too complicated. So you have a bunch of people basically that if they're gonna buy something between Bitcoin and ETH, because that's the bucket that they choose, they're probably gonna choose Bitcoin for quite a while now, like for quite a while more, until that narrative has like either fully priced in or just played out. With the other altcoins, like if you want to buy something else, right? And this is something I've been very vocal about, because people for some reason are still very angry at me that I'm like not the biggest fan of altcoins in these kind of circumstances. But I'm like, if you want to buy something really dumb, like that's better than buying ETH. It makes more sense because it's a different bucket. It's a different kind of customer base. And they're gonna buy the dog shit bucket anyway, right? And then you can make bets with that and you can make gains. But ETH, it's usually like a little bit, it's in a more sophisticated kind of hands with Bitcoin. And if all of the sophisticated hands just kind of like trade off of the ETF, then what's left for ETH? And for me, like the way I look at it, there's not that much left. And we've seen that in price, right? It's down like what, like 40% now? I don't even know, from the high to the low. And in comparison to other altcoins, yeah, it's like 40%. And in comparison to other altcoins, it's just been underperforming, right? Like you've seen a bunch of altcoins, like Link, for example, against Bitcoin, that's up, that's making higher lows. That's just not in the serious bucket. Right? So like people can buy it because they're like, Bitcoin and ETH are too expensive for me. I'm just gonna buy something else. So you can get enough people because it has a small enough market cap for that to matter. But with Bitcoin and ETH, it's a different story. So that's why I'm so insistent on ETH doing poorly, because for me, the people that are gonna buy ETH are gonna take away from Bitcoin. And also, it just means that the whole narrative is starting to break down or has priced in. So that's why I look at it this way. But I could be completely wrong. Seen a lot of really good traders argue otherwise. I mean, they're down 20% now, but still, like maybe it mean reverse.
Ouch! You had to throw them under the bus there, didn't you?
With
your cat claws, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, it can, and like this is something that ETH has done before, where it just puts in a 10% daily and then a 15% daily the next day. It's not like this is like forever down. I do think ETH is gonna bounce eventually, but I think it should be towards the end of this whole narrative, not at the front of it. Like we had a full bull run where ETH was outperforming. I think if we get like a good bullish movement, we're gonna get a full bullish movement where ETH is underperforming, and then at the end of it, maybe claw some of these losses back. That's kind of my view on the whole matter.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I think for those positioning in ETH now, the argument, if I had to make it for them, would be some version of historically, ETH sort of outperforms Bitcoin in a bull market. Bitcoin being above 30K drastically increases the odds of a bull market. Therefore, I want to be early to that rotation. And I don't, therefore, and by implication, I don't think this breakdown in ETH BTC is going to stick, or some version of that. At worst, they end up being early to the trade. But I'm sure if you were to ask them, the counter argument might be the outperformance in ETH BTC is going to be such that even if I'm taking this drawdown now, by the time it catches up, I'm fine with taking this, eating shit in the short term, given the magnitude of outperformance that I expect in the sort of medium to long term. But it is kind of like a wrong trade anyway, being so early to it, like you can call it early, but you're also wrong because you're very much underwater. So that's not helpful. I'm inclined to agree. I think the technicals on ETH-BTC suck, and there seemingly still is enough juice in the BTC ETF narrative to give it precedence. And I agree with the bucket theory as well between BTC, ETH, and then the rest of the market. So I mean that's consistent. I'd be interested to see what your trade management looks like if ETH BTC does start to bounce, like basically how aggressive that management is. Like, it just crept up to 0.57 and you've just turned full capo. Something like that would be quite funny. I didn't expect that to be the case, but
I think
ETH USD, by the way. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, at that point you can just rotate into altcoins and take like a couple of days of nice price action there. But that's kind of like how
the extent of it. Yeah.
Like that's the kind of sad part about all of this, that I think that I'm expecting ETH to underperform Bitcoin if Bitcoin goes up, and I think if Bitcoin tops, there's gonna be other altcoins that you're gonna make much more money with. So you kind of you're trying to play it safe, but by trying to play it safe, you're taking on the worst position possible, I think, which is basically you're gonna massively underperform in ETH relative to Bitcoin, and even if the market tops and whatever, and you get like a little bit of an altcoin pop, I think that's going to be vastly outsized. Like there's going to be vastly outsized returns anywhere else rather than ETH. So I think it's just poorly positioned right now. But yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just going to be a solo ETH run at some point down the line. We'll see.
The flipping Don coming to a neighborhood near you. Yeah, I didn't really have anything else to add, really. Especially on like the ETH front, it's one of those until proven otherwise type of things, and you've just got such a dominant downtrend in this thing, and such narrative dominance from the Bitcoin side. It just feels like a lot of the ETH buying on the way down has been overthinking. If I had to summarize it, but yeah, there's not much else to add on the ETH USD front of things. Presumably, I tried to point out this analogy it's not even an analogy, like a direct comparison in Monday markets, where we were dealing with BTC breaking 30K at the time, whereas the equivalent for ETH would be breaking 2.2K or 1.9K if you want to be charitable, and it's not even there yet,
Yep.
So I don't know, structurally ETH USD is just showing the weakness, unsurprisingly, that's in ETH BTC. And also, Don, it might be quite funny if the 1935 weekly level becomes relevant again. I'll have to cancel the show and delete my account at that point because I'm so tired of that level.
Yeah, that'd be fucking horrendous. I could see it, honestly. Like if Bitcoin starts rallying, I think 2K would be a very strong resistance. Like if Bitcoin proper rallies, not like the 1 or 2% things that we've seen before, but like proper like 10% days, I think there's a good chance that ETH just struggles with 2K again and just hangs around there, because it's very hard. Like whenever Bitcoin like puts in these good days, it's very hard for altcoins to keep up. So what usually happens is the altcoins get stuck at the level that is most prominent on the chart, nearby to price, And then once Bitcoin calms down, the altcoins actually put in like a 10-15% day. So I could actually see ETH be stuck to 1945 again if we see bullish price action on Bitcoin, which would be very, very funny. Because
I'm just going to ignore the chart and pretend it's not real. I've spent too much of my life talking about that level, so I'm not sure I can give it that much more time.
I get that.
Before altcoins, actually, I want to jump to indices really quickly because they've not been having a particularly rosy time.
No.
This is something we talked about both on the monthly and the weekly. That the monthly close was garbage, right? The last time we had around the monthly close when we discussed this, based on the 43.10 to 43.70 level, and that was an argument that we made on this show. I think that even if it rallies this month, that it's a rally into resistance, and what a rally into resistance it was. Thank God crypto had this momentum, narrative, liquidation sort of window, because if we were anywhere in sort of correlated sideways territory, we'd be eating spoonfuls of shit at that point. I will add that did make the Bitcoin trade slightly trickier, right?
Yes.
Because if you were looking at this and trying to get a sense of risk, and if you had any, if you gave any weight to the correlation argument, it was very hard from a high time frame point of view to think, oh, well, risk is going to do well, and I think BTC can break out. Because if you look at the S&P and the NASDAQ, those look terrible into bearish retests. So it's like when you and I were discussing on WhatsApp, essentially, where your argument was, look, all of this stuff kind of looked garbage, but I had to go with my gut and ignore it, because if I spent too much time looking at like the S&P and levels, etc., it became quite hard to catch the move, essentially. Now this thing, your big range for this, the Don Grand Unifying Theory, is some version of 3,700 to what, like 4,300 between there.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, we're coming off the top side of that. Do you think it's likely? Well, A, do you think it's likely that we reach the other end of it at 3,700? And B, if we do, I mean, is that the kind of weakness that you can ignore, essentially? Because that would be pretty bad, I feel like. It's quite hard to reconcile sort of mega high time frame, multi-week, multi-month swing BTC if this thing is going to shit the bed towards those lows. I don't know if that makes any sense.
I mean, I do agree. Like, it makes it really hard. This is basically, I mean, I was struggling. The only reason why I was actually struggling in that trade, because for me, it just seemed like it needed to go up, basically. Like, I looked at Bitcoin, I'm like, I mean, this is just going to go up. And I looked at the S&P, and I was like, fuck, this makes it so fucking difficult. And I'm still in that camp, right? I look at Bitcoin, and I'm like, in my opinion, this just should go up. But then I look at the S&P, and this is actually where my worries start creeping in, where I'm like, if this continues, and for me, like I said, I think there's going to be a range between 3.7 and 4.3. And if it just straight up goes to a range low now, there's a good chance that we're going to get some weakness that comes from the S&P into crypto, which is not great. So like this one, like this trade that I'm in right now, like from like 27, 28 towards like wherever we're gonna go, is, in my opinion, a really, really difficult one. Just based on that, basically, like we have been trading in lockstep with the S&P for so long. Now we've had a breakout, the S&P had a breakdown. Is this the end of the correlation, or is this just going to snap back? And honestly, I don't have a good answer to it. That's why I have like these invalidations in place. Like if we go below 32 or 30 or whatever, I'm like, at some point I'm going to have to basically dip out. And it's mainly like, if I just ignored everything and just traded Bitcoin, I'd be quite happy holding my position and giving most of my gains back, as in like if it goes to 28, 27, at that point I'd be like, okay, maybe I was just wrong, just based on how much potential this has. But given that I look at the S&P too, I'm a little bit more cautious, and that's why I'm like, I have invalidations higher up. But yeah, all that to say, I don't like how the S&P looks. I think it's getting into an area of support where there's probably going to be a bounce.
You got to pray for the mid-range for once, Don. The saucy 4K round number meme, monthly cluster, weekly level type of thing. That's the new cope.
I mean, this chart just looks like shit, especially on the monthly. It just looks like shit.
The monthly is pretty... appalling. Yeah.
I mean, this is a Wall Street cheat sheet.
Oh,
If
God.
you've ever seen one, it's not a good.
I've seen too many, Don.
Yeah. So like this is the one argument that I will give the bears that is just unambiguously just kind of bad for crypto, bad for Bitcoin, that we will have to power through. And the question is basically, is the Bitcoin ETF enough to get us through this or not? And the answer I just don't have. For me, the reason why I'm still happily holding is basically because there's not, I think if I close and I'm wrong, I will not get an entry. Like there's 0% chance that I'm going to be in it. And if it goes to 60K from here, which I think is a possibility if everything goes well, and I don't have an entry, I'm going to be coping and I'm going to be mad and I'm going to be upset. So I'm just like,
We'll have something in common for a change, Don. Wouldn't that be nice?
Oh, God.
Surely that's attractive enough.
I'm just gonna ignore that.
Fine, fair. Yeah, I mean that's legacy because I mean it looks shit. Hope for a mid-range bounce, otherwise range low.
I'm not a fan.
Fair enough.
But yeah,
I think it's hard to be a fan.
Yeah, and I think in general, like the cool thing is that it's doing what I wanted it to, or like what I expected it to, not necessarily what I wanted it to. But at least it's not doing something crazy that is unexpected. It's just, couldn't we not have had like the crypto move during all of those weeks of S&P upside? That would have been such an easy trade in comparison. Nope, we had to have it.
At least we got it eventually, right?
At the tail end, yeah.
Better late than never. And yeah, it's very interesting to see if this is like a full decouple. I mean, I don't know. I get personally very concerned when I hear like paradigm shifting arguments in general, regardless of the context of what they are. Like, yeah, we've essentially been lockstep, and even before the lockstep in general, you know, global risk and indices were a decent enough proxy for BTC. But now, after the last 2 weeks of price action, forget all that, you know, throw the book out. I'm way more conservative when it comes to shifting those types of priors. But I mean, we will literally fuck around and find out. So, you know, all of your questions will be answered.
I just wish we didn't have that headache. But if you want to see something funny, type in Bitcoin USD divided by S&P USD. And it's actually quite a nice looking chart. Now that we've had this monthly pump.
It looks like BTC on the monthly.
It does a little bit look like Bitcoin.
Oh, it's at resistance, Don. Is this? Are you secretly becoming a bear during the course of this show? As always, when you speak to me,
it's the same resistance. Fuck that resistance.
Oh, monthly resistance, not only on BTC but also on the ratio, Don. Good God, have you even looked outside and seen the plight of the German people?
Oh yes, I mean.
Sorry, from your castle, you probably can't see them. They look like fucking ants.
No, that's what I have.
And even then, it's just your butlers. You can't see any real people. That would be disgusting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and if it gets bad enough, just raise the drawbridge and fill the moat with crocodiles.
Perfect. Yeah, you are a cartoon villain indeed.
But yeah, I mean, I have a few headaches. Like it's not like I'm quite excited for how this could play out, but there's quite a few headaches in this trade, and they are not to be ignored.
Yeah,
and the S&P is one of them.
So essentially, the 30k reclaim, if it's anything like 6k reclaim and 12k breakout, could lead to a massive move. If there is a massive move, it'll be A, massive, B, very hard to get an entry, so you want an entry and have one. Invalidation-wise, because there's monthly resistance and the S&P looks like shit and a bunch of other reasons, you have built-in invalidations that are both technical, which is 32k, i.e. giving back a chunk of this momentum would be bad, and also kind of flow-driven invalidations to some extent, where if ETH BTC as a froth proxy starts to moon, that would also be bad.
Yep.
Okay. Can't wait not to copy trade that and not make any money. On the altcoin front, my little watch list here has Link, Solana, INJ, and oddly enough, RNDR. Link and Sol, we've been talking about for a while on various forms of media. trletter.com, weekly newsletter. If you're not signed up, I don't know what to tell you. Also, leave a like on this video if you're still listening. You know, if you tune in every week, an hour and a half, 2 hours of Casual Friday, and you haven't liked the video or subscribed, that I find that personally very upsetting. Yeah, so I mean, some altcoins are obviously doing really well. Like even looking at Link today, it's up 3% while Bitcoin's down 1.5%, right? And the Link BTC pair you mentioned earlier looks strong, and generally this is off the back of a year-long breakout. The Solana side of things, I think, is getting a bit tricky at $30.
Agree.
That's kind of the local extremity of sorts. I think this is a pretty tough one to chase without even a shallow pullback. INJ, I don't even know what the fuck this thing is, and I'm scared to ask. But hasn't been struggling exactly. That's a big breakout into, I mean, former range high stuff going on here, but in general also outlier. I mean, it's up 10% today, which is mental. And RNDR came up in one of the watch list things. Just as a funny daily trend, have you looked at RNDR USD on the daily time frame?
No, I actually haven't looked at it.
Yeah, go check it out. That's like a comical uptrend. This is like Baby Pip's cred shit video uptrend.
Oh yeah, whatever the fuck that is.
Whatever this is, yeah. So there are a few of those floating around. Presumably you're just like too hyper focused on BTC to give a shit about any of these. And also, if they do start mooning, that's not really helpful to your thesis because it would mean potentially signs of froth that would threaten the underlying position.
I mean, in general, they're small enough that I don't really care, even if they went up a bunch. But I'm like, if I went out and bought a bunch of altcoins and then just kind of diluted my attention away from something that's actually important, which is, in my opinion, the whole Bitcoin thesis right now. Like if Bitcoin goes down, right? If we lose the Bitcoin supports that I outlined, you're not going to be too happy in those altcoins either. Right. So I think at that point, like for me, it just makes sense to focus on the thing that's actually driving the market right now. And then there's obviously a few outliners, but I couldn't care less. Like I'm not the guy that trades breakouts, and all of what those coins are doing is breakouts. Just how these altcoins are trading. They go up like 200% and then they go up another 100%, and people are like, oh, you missed it, whatever. I just don't trade that way, right? So like whenever people ask me like, hey, talk about this hot coin of the week or whatever that went up 100%, I'm like, why the fuck would you want my opinion on this? Like I'm not going to give you any retrace levels that you can actually buy, because at the end of the day, if it goes to where those are, it's probably gonna be a bad buy.
It comes at the end of the trend, yeah.
And I'm not someone that kind of breakout trades in general, so it's kind of a useless thought experiment. And it's also like I've had a bunch of people be like, oh, you're coping because you're not holding these INJ or whatever, the one that you said earlier. Sure. I don't even know what the fuck it is, or where it's trading or how the chart looks. Like I couldn't care less. Obviously happy for the people that are making money with it, but I just don't trade this way. Like if something's up 200%, there's very minimal chance that you're gonna see me buy it. Obviously not the best way to trade. I think if you're trading altcoins, you have to be comfortable with buying something that's 200% up. But that's why I just largely trade altcoins when I see clear rotations. I'm also going to be one of the people that are going to be buying ETH, right? Like I'm shit talking ETH and I'm saying like that you're going to make more money with other altcoins. Still probably going to buy ETH instead of the other altcoins, just because it's closer to the trading style that I make money with, rather than buying something and then being a backholder for the rest of my life. I'd rather take the 10% in something.
At 100x leverage, Don, just got to add the zeros.
Exactly.
That's how we win.
And then like rather take the safe 10%, the ones that I know I can capture, over the 20 or 30% that I could get elsewhere. Like it just seems like an obvious bet at that point, especially given that you have to kind of think about liquidity constraints. On a lot of these, you actually don't. But in general, like for the small caps, I've seen a bunch of people shill like $20 million market cap small caps at me. Like I just rather not. So that's just not me anymore. I used to be that way. I just don't trade that way anymore.
Well, whatever you're doing is working, so maybe stick to that.
Yes.
I'll say that much. Yeah, the altcoin stuff's always very funny. Even if you nail, say, the BTC move, you'll still get accused of coping for missing like outlier altcoins, which is super comical. I mean, I understand that argument sort of becomes more compelling depending on the market conditions. So like, there was a period where towards the top, not coincidentally, BTC was just doing nothing, just stuck in a range, and altcoins were going insane. At that point, you could level the charge of cope to someone who only trades BTC, being like, oh, dude, this is like mega alt season, you can't miss, and you're just like looking at BTC going sideways. That I understand. But if you're just looking at like early trend or someone who just exclusively trades BTC, it's just a weird thing to accuse people of, not trading the exact way that you do. And it's always, again, very difficult to reconcile with the whole Twitter message of, oh, don't overtrade and do what works for you type of stuff. And then, God forbid, they catch one altcoin out of the 100 that they bought. They'll call everyone an idiot who's in the same trade as them, which is always very interesting. But yeah,
it's also interesting because it's oftentimes like the people that are like they're trading $20 million market cap coins and they're like, haha, you're coping because you're missing, and they're trading with like $200. And I just don't get it. Like, I mean, I'm not out here to shame anyone for the size that they're trading with, right? But if you go to someone that's very publicly like successful in the last whatever how many years, and then you're kind of like, oh, you're missing out, you're coping, whatever, while you're trading those kind of amounts, I think that's just a pretty retarded way to go about things. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I just don't get how that makes any sense, but it is what it is. That's just how Twitter goes. And I mean, gonna have some shit with the good as well, because I gotta say, like, ever since I went private on Twitter, my feed's been, or like my mentions and everything has been very, very nice.
Dude, I was gonna say, you're not very good at this influencer thing going private, because we need your account to really blow up in order to shill our ref link, and so that I can afford rent and groceries. That's how the flow goes here. So the fact that you've gone private now has stymied my income. So now I'm drinking Tesco's own brand cola, and I'm on ramen and eggs. So if you could, have some consideration for your fellow man, and more importantly, your fellow co-host, and start whoring yourself out with our ref link, that'd be very welcome.
I mean, I would, but then like I would do it for 2 days, and then I would delete Twitter and then return. So
you're saying this is the least bad option.
Yes, I think that's pretty much exactly how I would put it.
Fine, fair enough. Also, very pressing, important, philosophical, detailed question. We had a big nuke on the 1 minute on BTC.
No.
From high to low, that's 1.2%. Is that the generational Pico bottom that we'll look back on fondly in weeks and months to come, thinking, oh my God, if you weren't buying 33,386, you're not going to make it?
I mean, when I just look at the minute chart, right, and this is very serious TA. I mean, the buyback was nice, but the fact that it's already slumping back down again is not necessarily the greatest.
It's time to adjust your macro thesis, Don.
Oh yeah,
I'll take over the show and do the news while you start selling. Okay, don't worry, I got you. This is what friends are for.
Fair enough.
I just hear your keyboard getting mashed up.
Yeah,
fist through the monitors, you get slipped.
Key whopping.
Oh man, there are a couple of news bits and pieces. They're not super interesting. I don't know how long we've been recording for. How long have we been recording for? Do you have any idea?
We have been recording for 1.5 hours.
Okay, we can do 2 of these. Let's do 2 of these. One is that ARK Invest sells more Coinbase and GBTC shares amid Bitcoin surge. Kathy Wood, man, she's really special.
Throw up the ARK chart.
Oh god,
throw it up. Like, you have to. It's hilarious. I looked at it today actually, which is
it
quite
double
funny.
K? Yeah, it is ARK. Yeah.
Yeah.
At least it's not 3Ks. That would be concerning.
It's better this way, yeah.
But this does not look
great.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I saw an interview today where she was like, I hate it when people I hate when people sell the bottom, so I hope they don't sell ARK. And that was like at 100 and something.
Oof.
And I was like, that's an interesting way to put it. Doesn't look like selling the bottom to me now that we're trading at 30, but is what
Didn't
it is.
she also like nuke her Nvidia bags before it went mega?
Yes, exactly before it went to infinity.
Yeah. Oh, does this make you bullish? The fact that maybe she's a monthly time frame respector, Don. Selling Coinbase and GBTC amid Bitcoin surge.
The thing is, like, and there's a few more things that have me a little bit worried, right? And especially as someone that is like usually a monthly time frame respector.
Right.
If I look at Coinbase, right, that's also a very ugly chart. And I mean, I know that it's been trading with the S&P rather than with crypto. Something that we've been seeing over the last few weeks. Has cared less about crypto and more about the S&P going up and down. But that's one hell of an ugly looking chart on the weekly time frame.
It's a glimpse into the future, Don, of weekly candles.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the ones that has me a little bit worried. So there's a few
I'm telling you, by the time we're done recording, like, you're gonna have to post Twitter updates. Speaking to me will be the most expensive decision of your life.
Yeah, but no, but I mean, this is just something that you have to keep in mind,
Sure.
right? Obviously, there's bullish things and bearish things. This is not one of the bullish things. Coinbase has been eating shit. Also, like the whole GPTC thing, I actually think that's a nice sell.
Oh, that's my cope from last week. I wasn't wrong, Don. I was early.
I mean, GPTC is up a shitload, right?
Yes.
And the reason why it's up that much is basically, I mean, it's just been closing. It's been closing the negative premium that it's had.
Also known as discount.
Yes, whatever. Let me sound smart for a second.
Yes, go on. The negative premium, yeah. The convexity gamma effects on the long end of the curve have been crazy, dude.
But I've seen, and this is something we talked on Weekly Open with Brian about, how like at some point that trade just isn't that attractive anymore when the premium is so like marginal. So I think like selling that makes a lot of sense given that that has happened. A lot of that has reversed. So that one I get. Coinbase also looks like shit to me anyway on the weekly time frame. This is why, and this is something that I've been saying for a long time now, why I don't overcomplicate things, right? Like I didn't buy Coinbase, I bought Bitcoin. And I could have obviously, like there was a time where Coinbase massively outperformed Bitcoin during this rally. I think it's still up more than Bitcoin. I actually don't know. It's up 120%. Bitcoin's probably around the same. Yeah, it's pretty much exactly the same. So like there were times where Coinbase outperformed, but in general, this is something that I've learned over the years. You don't like, and I've seen a lot of people even in the early days back in 2014, 15, 16, where people invested a lot in infrastructure, right? They were like, okay, I'm bullish on crypto. I could bet on Bitcoin, but it will make much more if I invest in these companies that try to build something with crypto, whatever.
Or the classic, not Bitcoin, but blockchain or whatever the fuck that whole thesis was called, where we had all these institutional blockchains and layers, and it was just all ended up being dog shit. So people who are like early to crypto and early to blockchain,
and they're poor now.
Yeah, just hate shit.
Yeah. And this is why, like, I mean, Coinbase seems like a decent bet in general. Like, so I'm not hating too much on that. But it's just like, if I'm bullish crypto, I buy Bitcoin. And then if I'm less bullish crypto because we've just had a bullish cycle, I rotate into altcoin so I can rotate into USD afterwards. That's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah.
Anything more complicated than that, like one, I'm way too dumb for. I think people give me way too much credit. Like I'm quite a dumb motherfucker from time to time. Like the more complicated stuff, I just don't understand. And also, like, why the fuck would I need to overcomplicate it? Like, there's nothing more agonizing than sitting in a trade where you thought that, like, hey, I'm gonna make more if Bitcoin goes up, and then you actually end up making nothing. Like I've done that before. I've sat in altcoins before when Bitcoin went on a run, or I like had a small portion of my portfolio in altcoins and was coping about those the entire way up while Bitcoin went on a run, and I didn't make much gains on that part of the portfolio.
Well, so the thing is, the over-rotating, it causes a cycle, right? So something pumps, and you're like, well, I missed that pump, so I'm going to buy something else. You buy the something else, and the thing that's pumped first starts consolidating while you're rotating into garbage. And then the stronger thing breaks out again, but you've allocated the garbage, so you chase it. But then you've chased it starts consolidating again. You're like, oh, fuck this. I'm going to buy something stronger. And you chase the top of that. Do you know what I mean? It creates this, like, I explained it very poorly there, but it just creates this cycle where you chase the weak thing at the most inopportune time and then rotate to the strong thing at the most inopportune time, and it just ends up being total garbage. You miss out. You miss out on the strong move every single time, and you're always in the weakest asset by that function, and you just keep doing it as well because your mindset is like, I'm going to try to maximize my returns, and if your timing sucks, which once you get trapped in that spiral, it sucks every time. You can miss out on like a decent chunk of a trend just by being impatient, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's why, like, that's one of the reasons why I think ETH is just a little bit cursed, because a lot of people are trying to do exactly that, and I think basically they're all at risk. Now, obviously, this could be the peak or bottom of ETH, but like, you're basically, if you're in an ETH position, and I really don't want to FUD anyone out of an ETH position, because I think ETH is going to bounce higher than this level at some point, but like, if you're in an ETH position, you're stuck in that position with a lot of other people that try to rotate early. Because a lot of people just tried, like, they were bullish, they saw Bitcoin going up, they're like, I can buy the discounted thing, ETH always catches up, blah, blah, blah. But then you're putting yourself in a position where a lot of people that were just sitting, like, they basically missed out the entire Bitcoin move, that are coping massively. Like, if the market moves the wrong way, all of those people are already kind of mentally damaged from sitting through like a Bitcoin pump that didn't really return them anything, because they were in the wrong asset. But then also, like, if that intensifies, there's a good chance that they just capitulate, right? So that's kind of what I'm personally hoping for on ETH, because that's going to be a great buy. But obviously it's not great for the people holding ETH, because capitulation takes price lower. But then again, at least it's going to be swift, right? Because if this capitulates properly, if this goes down like 10-20% in a day, the next day it's probably going to be back to where it was before. So it's not that the end of the world. It's just, if you're putting yourself in a position where you rotate early, you have to be you have to have some balls, and you have to stick with it, and it's going to get really, really hard to stick with it if this continues to go poorly, in my opinion, because then you're going to see a bunch of people basically capitulate out of there, because they don't really have conviction anyway. They were just like, they see other people make money, and then they jump into something where they think they're going to make money too, and then they see other people make even more money, and that's basically a recipe for disaster, because easy to sell in those circumstances. So that's why I'm like a little bit, like, why I've been so vocal, because I usually am not, like, I don't really care if altcoins go down or not. This ETH trade, I've just seen too many people get sucked into. But yeah, watch this be the bottom, me FUDding ETH. I've been saying this literally since 30% ago.
It's been a while, mate. Yeah. Well, the thing is, there's almost like there are also invisible costs to being in those types of positions. Like, the obvious opportunity cost and tying up your capital is one, but also it affects your future trading, which is really tends to be the more expensive part, right? Like, the odds of you managing that position that you've been in for so long and underwater for so long are pretty low. But then the impact it has on your subsequent trading, like your drawdown tolerance and the amount of time you can handle being on a trade. If all of that suffers as well, then you're almost getting doubly fucked, right? Like, fucked on the trade itself, but then if it stops you from making good trades in the future, that's also a very expensive mistake. And in general, just rotating is really fucking hard. I mean, it's hard, but it's also simple, because the simple premise is buy stuff that's strong because it's most likely going to stay strong, and sell stuff that's weak because it's most likely going to stay weak. But then you get these outlier windows and sectoral outperformers, and a day where the strong thing you rotated into is consolidating and some other garbage is up 20% and you want to chase it. There are just so many pitfalls and distractions on a path that's rather straightforward that it's one of those much easier said than done type of things. Yeah, and we somehow got here from an ARK Invest Coinbase GBTC thing. So I think
that's how my mind works.
We're done. We're done for the news, I reckon.
Yeah.
Done. Any final questions, comments, notes, concerns? One thing that I've learned is that I should really start bringing up more random shit, because as we went through the show, the list of things that you purportedly, that's a hard word, purportedly care about for your position just started to increase. It went from just BTC, then it went to ETH, then it went to maybe some altcoins, then it's the S&P, and then it's ARK. I didn't even get to talk about GME or any of that other stuff. Maybe I should bring up, like, I don't know, Swedish krona and the New Zealand dollar. Have you seen that pair, Don? It's really breaking out. That's terrifying for commodities. Just start making shit up and find a way to impact your decision making there, as any good friend would.
Yeah, no, so far so good. I'm actually like,
I don't know, this 1 minute you were bearish, so, and it's been going down only.
I mean, look how good of a trader I am. Like, ever since I said it's, I don't know, it's been going down only.
You name the time frame, I'll name the trade. You know, like some cheesy motto like that for our paid group.
No, I think people just need to zoom out a little bit. Look at the daily time frame. That's a good one. From like a not panicking because something goes like not necessarily up for once. Like, that's what I'm looking at to cope. Convince myself that I'm in a good position after all, and that the whole global situation and the S&P and all of it doesn't matter, because the daily still looks good. So that's what you should be doing too, because I mean, if I do it, it has to be great. And there we go. That's the wisdom of the day.
Uttered by a man of completely sound mind, obviously.
I mean, if anyone thinks I'm sound mind, they've lost theirs long ago.
I don't think anyone does. Right. Before we take this rabbit hole any deeper, I think that's it for the show. Leave us a like if you made it this far. Thank you for listening to another episode of Casual Friday. As always, the show is brought to you by Woo. Links available in the description below if you want to support the show directly. As always, do not keep any more funds than you need for trading on any given exchange. The whole point of leverage is to allow you to reduce your counterparty risk. Let's hope this 5 minute doesn't turn into a full-on Ponzi monthly bearish retest collapse. Otherwise, we will see you next week for all of our content, which should be quite fun because we'll have the weekly close, the monthly close, and all the reasons in the world for cope/euphoria. That's it from us. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.